Hello and welcome to Deep Impact, a proud member of the Doof Network where we dive deep into Wildbow's most Canadian work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
And we are back to talk about Void 7.5. So, this is an interesting chapter. We have some intense discussion to have later on, but for now let's get through the first half of the chapter where they fight some ghouls and talk about some weird things. So Blake, Rose, and Maggie are heading into the center of the city, but they have to fight their way through a few ghouls, including one ghoul that is weirdly fat, which kind of keeps Rose guessing.
Yeah. So there's actually a bit of a time skip between where 7.4 ended and where this one starts. And so I guess, having gone through it a second time, Blake has told Rose, Maggie, and Evan what he thinks.
Yeah.
The Baham's trick is, based on the fact that he coordinates with stuff Evan later. I'm assuming he basically told them what he thinks is going on. So it's just us that's sort of trying to figure it out as it's all going down.
I don't know if he tells Rose and Maggie. Evan clearly seems to know because they have their little plan worked out for later. But I guess it would be pretty stupid to not tell Rose and Maggie. I don't know.
Yeah. I agree. I would say Blake has stupidly not told Rose and Maggie some other things in the last arc or so, but not that super tactically relevant, I guess. So it seems weird if he didn't.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I do like how off-put by this fat ghoul Rose is, because she's got her whole scientific approach to practicing, and it kind of feels like if you study biology, it's sort of like one of the first rules you learn in biology is all the classifications have exceptions, and it feels like she's still someone struggling with that. Like when you're a first year biology student, you're like, just fit in your category. God.
Yeah. There's a point where Blake hears a page turning, which obviously we are only meant to assume is Rose is actively trying to research ghouls while they're fighting it to try and figure out what's going on, which I love.
There's a number of moments during this scene where she's just reading from the book essentially. So she's doing on the field lookups basically.
Yeah. And Evan basically says something to the effect of ghouls just being stronger zombies because he learned it from a video game. And Rose refuses to accept this, even though as they learn more and more things about ghouls over the course of this chapter, it's just clearly true.
The bit where Evan later is like, so they are just kind of superpowered zombies, and as the text just says, I could hear Rose sigh. It's good.
Yeah, it's classic. So they talk about how to kind of take out these ghouls, but the best answer they can come up with, I guess, is eggs. So they start egging these ghouls, which kind of works. It's hard to tell if it works because it works or it works just because the ghouls are kind of confused by this.
And I just wanted to quickly pull out one line so first of all, Rose's response to Blake's original idea about eggs, actually it's Evan's idea about eggs, is like, you just want to egg the cannibalistic monsters. And I just love this whole set. I love the idea that it actually wasn't working. The ghouls were just so flabbergasted that these randos came up and just started throwing eggs at them. Yeah. That they were just kind of put off. But I also, and then Evan also mentions that he never liked eggs, so I guess Wildbow's war on eggs predates what I expected.
Yeah, so the backstory to Evan's war on eggs is his mum explained eggs to him as she was trying to explain kind of female reproductive health and the menstrual cycle, which is why Evan kind of gets squicked out by eggs now. Do you think this is the origin of Wildbow's war on eggs? Do you think this is a real story from his own childhood?
Could be. But the whole conversation around this is hilarious.
Yeah.
The bit where menstrual fluids first come up and Blake sort of looks at Maggie before he realizes what he's doing.
Yeah, and Maggie's just like, straight-faced.
No.
No.
Yeah. It's pretty good. It also, I can kind of see why they had to put Evan to sleep, though. I know Blake has thought that partially...
Evan to sleep. Yeah, they just asked him to go to sleep.
But they had to trick him with the whole it'll help Blake thing. Because he is kind of annoying here. This is a sort of tense planning situation, and Evan's just getting FOMO about not knowing what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I can see why there was a bit of a need to put him to sleep without Blake. Like he I guess he can actually be annoying. Like I loved it as a reader, but if I was there in the moment, I would have been like, "Oh God, just
let
not
us
now."
focus." Yeah, totally. So they do kind of use eggs, I suppose. They smear eggs on weapons and kind of dispatch 2 of the 4 ghouls quite quickly. Quickly enough that the other 2 ghouls are put off, and Blake says to them, "Hey, you guys can either be killed, you can be bound, or you can swear to never hurt another living soul." And they choose to never hurt another living soul.
Yeah, and Blake is disappointed by this, which
Yeah.
like I mean, obviously I get on some level that like he would love to have tools at his disposal, but that is such a different perspective from like the Blake we knew 3-4 arcs ago. Like Blake back then would have been like, "Oh yeah, like that sucks, I guess, but I still did the right thing." Whereas here he's kind of like, "Oh, I suppose that's right."
Yeah, I think he's starting to realize the importance of having, tools at his disposal, right? And this is kind of, I think, thematically similar to what we've been talking about, how he's dehumanizing June a bit over time. He kind of realizes, like, I don't know, I think he's starting to realize that he can't afford to be as empathetic to others as he has been.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's interesting because he offers them this choice. Like they still like it's
Yeah,
a good
true.
sign that he even offers them the choice. But like, there's that difference in response to them taking that. Like I do think if this had been Arc 3 Blake and he'd gotten a ghoul to swear off ever like hurting humans again, he would have been ecstatic with himself. He would have been like, "Hell yeah! Like look what I just did."
I think he actually wouldn't have, back in whatever Arc 3, he wouldn't have wanted to send a ghoul after anybody, even a Bahame. He would have been like, "No way." Who knows what collateral damage that could cause, right?
Yeah.
There's a moment in this fight where, as well, Corvidae kind of moves towards one of the ghouls and realizes that he can't do anything and just kind of gets out of the way and like invites the ghoul to walk past him. Which is obviously a bit of a dick move, but I don't know. Corvidae is really kind of endearing himself to me. He's very like down to earth and seems just like a kind of chill villainous guy.
Yeah, I mean, like part of me deep down wonders if maybe this was part of his whole thing. Like I don't know, because we still don't really understand how he does what he does, but maybe this interaction seeded some of that. Because it does seem out of character for a ghoul to promise never to hurt another living creature, so maybe JP did something to it, but I didn't really get that impression. He's so much more like clever or cunning, might be a better word, than the rest of Rosa's party.
Yeah.
Like, the rest of them, like, Hexus and the Tallow Man and stuff, and Mary, are all just kind of blindly obedient or insane.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, he's so creepy. He's just so totally creepy, Corvidae. He's just, he's so clever and creepy and unsettling.
Yeah, we'll get into that
fantastic.
more later this chapter as well. Corvidae gets some fun moments in the later part of this chapter, but for now they kind of have bested the ghouls, and Blake and the Cabal walk over to a car that's occupied by a woman, and Blake kind of remarks on her strange connections, but we don't get more detail than that. Rather than kind of attack her, which Maggie seems to almost want to do, they graciously help her push her car into her garage. And we don't know who this woman is, right? Like Blake and the characters do, but we, the audience, don't. It's like the opposite of dramatic irony, which I'm going to call comedic irony. And I love it. It's like, it's such a fun way for us to be a bit left in the dark as we slowly find out what actually has happened here.
Well, it's just like, it's a different kind of tension, right? Like we've spent a lot of time recently on the sort of like the tension has been things could go wrong and people are going to die any second now, and this is like different because Blake and Maggie are just so instantly in control of this whole situation, and they're very comfortable, and so the tension turns from worrying for them and instead just sort of like trying to like piece all the puzzle together. So the tension comes from you trying to figure something out. It's just a nice little change of pace for a bit.
Yeah, you're right. It definitely it keeps us still engaged, but in a different kind of lighter way than like, oh shit, bad things are constantly happening.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't worry, we'll get back to that later though. So we get this fun setup where this woman kind of doesn't really know what's up. She doesn't recognize Blake, But we find out that she is the fiancée of Duncan Behame, right? And Blake and his crew know who she is, and eventually she figures out that something bad is going on, or she's told that something bad is going on. But both of them are stuck in this situation of not kind of being able to let that on.
Yeah. And so just before we get further into that, I quickly wanted to call out. There's a line when Blake says that they'll help her put her car in the garage. Maggie gets a bit put off by how he volunteered her for this, and she says, "If I wanted to do work, I'd be doing something different with my life." And like, I'm very curious what Maggie's definition of work is here, because I don't think we've seen any form of practicing that isn't work on some level.
Yeah,
like
sure.
I don't know. And I mean, this goblin queening doesn't really seem like a walk in the park, and now she's embroiled in a war for a city, so I don't really understand what her idea of work is here.
Yeah. Yep. Fair point. Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, we then find out obviously this woman is Joanna, the fiance of Duncan, and it seems like Blake and the crew are here more intentionally than first appeared when this car just kind of broke down next to them.
I mean, yeah, like, because this whole thing seems suspiciously lucky to me. Like, the whole city's deserted, and then, like, Dunko's fiance just rolls up.
Yeah.
Like, so I didn't get the impression that they were here on purpose, because Blake seems like, oh, this is really lucky.
Yeah, and Maggie obviously kind of goes for the hyena sword first, and Blake's like, no, let's not do that. Like,
so,
you're right.
like, wait, is someone packing some good karma here that I wasn't aware of? Or, like, this is, because it doesn't feel like this was a setup by Duncan or Laird. Now referred to as Luncan, I guess.
Couple name, yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. This seems suspiciously good luck to me, and I feel like there might be something else going on. I don't know.
Yeah. You're right. I'm not sure what to make of this either. It definitely doesn't get explained in this chapter, but maybe we'll see if it comes up again. Anyway, now that they're in the house, it becomes apparent that Duncan knows they're here, but isn't using time magic to kind of teleport here, which is basically what Laird did last chapter to get away from them. And this kind of leads Blake to feel like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure I know what's going on here.
Which, I mean, I went through and read this, and I'm a little bit confused, because Duncan shows up like 2 minutes after they trip the alarm. Like, he's pretty damn quick. So I don't know how confident Blake should be feeling at this point, unless I'm misunderstanding something. Like, it becomes clear later that he's right, but yeah.
Yeah, it is quick, but it's not a immediate thing.
I guess.
I wonder if maybe there's a bit of time shenanigans here, I guess. I mean, there's obviously some kind of time shenanigans here, but it takes what? Yeah, you're right. It actually isn't that long. It's something like 20 sentences between Blake saying, why isn't he being here immediately? And he rocks up.
Oh, and there's nothing in there to imply that there was any bit where they were sitting and waiting as well. Like, that was sort of what I tried to keep an eye out for, and I didn't see anything that implied that to me.
Yeah, true. Anyway, we'll see. So Duncan rocks up. Actually, so Blake is talking about how he's starting to feel more confident in his theory. I'm curious if you had a point where you kind of started to realize what was going on before it gets spelled out, I suppose.
No, not really. I needed it to be spelled out to me. This I was thinking in a on very different tracks, which I'm sure the ending to our last episode probably made clear to everyone. I was thinking in very much the wrong direction. So it wasn't until Blake was halfway through explaining this that I actually caught up. I guess not figured it out, but caught up.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for all of those of you wanting to know what the trick is, stay tuned. Duncan arrives and and Blake kind of points out subtly to him that Joanna has offered them food and drink, and therefore they have been invited in. They've got food and drink. There's hospitality rules that kind of have to be observed here. And so Duncan kind of really wants to just shoot them, but knows that he can't.
Yeah, and who's the smug one now? Behames. Blake is very confident and proud of himself during this whole interaction with Duncan. I love it.
Yeah, and this is what makes it feel like this is planned out, because Blake really is fully in control of this situation. Like, he really has executed this pretty brilliantly, right? Like, he's set up a situation where Duncan is just neatly boxed into a corner and can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have some more to say about the long-term idea
Sure.
behind this plan as we get further in. But like, yeah, you're right. This works out very well, and it's nice to see Blake so in control and confident for a bit. It's a bit of a different color to what we usually get to see on him, so it's good.
Yeah. So Duncan tries something. He tries to grab an egg timer, which I assume is some kind of little tricky implement that he can use. I guess we forgot to mention that Duncan's house has a bunch of clocks in it, which is great. But yeah, Blake notices this and kind of calls him out and basically says to Duncan, try it. I know you can't. So, just drop the egg timer and call Laird, which Duncan just kind of has to eventually do.
Yeah, so my understanding here is that Duncan was basically trying to bait them into breaking hospitality first. I don't think. He didn't have any plans with the egg timer. I think the idea was he wanted them to notice that he swiped it, so that they might attack him, and then he could presumably attack them back without retribution, karma wise.
Yes. So Blake says something along the lines of, "Hey, if you can just freeze time for yourself and escape, you won't really be damaging me, so you can do it." And Duncan can't do anything. I suspect that Duncan's messing with Blake's perceptions would break the hospitality rules, right? And so Duncan is either trying to force Blake to do something and then he can react, or just take the egg timer as a resource for later. But yeah, Blake is just like, no, fuck that. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. I didn't really. I think the reason I felt compelled to explain my understanding of that was because I didn't have that on my first read through. It was really my second one. Once I understood the trick more, I was like, oh, okay, so that's what it was a bluff, basically to try and provoke an attack.
Yeah. So Duncan calls Laird. Laird arrives, and so do a number of Bahame kids and kind of dolls from the sisters to back them up.
I mean, apparently the plan was basically get Laird and his cavalry in here. Because hopefully Blake's gone all in with this plan.
Yeah, he really is confident that now that he's figured out the trick, he can deal with it, I guess, and in doing so, take Laird out, make Laird be overconfident, and take them out. I want to pull out this quote where Blake is thinking about whether he should let Joanna, Duncan's fiancée, go, and he thinks, I couldn't trust ordinary humans. Then again, she liked Duncan, of all people. How normal could she be? Which I think is just a great fuck Duncan line.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm usually a keen supporter of team fuck Duncan. But I'm going to have to go against Blake on this one. I know we've turned Duncan into a bit of a meme of incompetence in our podcast.
I mean, I don't think we did that much work to do that.
Well, no, yeah. I mean, in the story so far, he has not really proven that effective. But in the mortal realm, he's like an extremely successful and well-liked detective.
Yeah.
I think for a normal person, he probably is quite a good catch, basically.
Yeah.
So I don't really think this is fair at Blake.
Yeah, all right, fair enough. I want to call out one other thing, which is the very next line that Blake thinks, but it was a kindness, and I was starting to think that I needed to be more kind, especially after my last visit with Mrs. Lewis, which is just a great moment of Blake kind of realizing that he isn't just blindly slipping down the steep slope that he's kind of on as being a diabolist. He's realizing, hey, I need to make some conscious efforts to be kind, which I think is reassuring to know.
Yeah, and because I mean, this is the sort of decision I don't think we'd ever see Rose make because it was a tactical error. But he lets Joanna go by herself, and I guess I don't really understand exactly what in his conversation with Miss Lewis made him think this. She mentions I went back and read it, and she mentions the slippery slope very briefly. That's kind of it. I don't really understand what the connection here that concretely, I guess. I guess it just sewed that idea into his head. Just seeing her again reminded him of why he's avoided doing all the bad things.
Yeah, and why he's not taking the easy way out, I suppose. Yeah. So Duncan and Laird both kind of make some moves. They try and pull some tricks, and Blake kind of reveals that he's cracked it. The Bahames don't actually manipulate time, they manipulate the perceptions of people around them to make it look like they're manipulating time. So instead of, freezing time, what they do is just kind of turn off your brain for a bit. They go and run off, and then your brain kind of switches back on, and it feels to you like suddenly things have just happened while time was frozen.
Yeah, and so like at first this didn't really seem like a huge twist to me, because I guess things like the coffee shop incident way back in Arc 1, I'd already kind of assumed that was how it was working. It was just localized, because, you know, if you're altering someone's perception, it's just kind of like localized time messing withness. But then, like, what the more you think about it, the more you sort of like, oh, this changes like a lot of things.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that pretty soon, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important because if they're just freezing time, there's nothing you can do about it, right? Like that's just something that is beyond your ability to deal with. But as soon as Blake kind of cracks the trick to it, it doesn't actually change how the power works practically, but it means that he knows enough about how it works to be able to counter it, which, as he proves, is pretty powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, as Blake is kind of revealing this, we get these little explanations of how previous Bahame magic worked, which is so fun. It's like, it really makes me want to do another reread when we finish this one, to go back and be like, oh, what clues are there that this is actually how it was working? I want to talk about one, which is the slowing down time around the house, which I think is pretty important. So I went back to 3.5 when Blake kind of encounters this effect. Because Blake points out that he saw two different things. And the quote that is being referred to there is Blake saying, or Blake thinking, I looked, and I saw the quarter in the air, spinning in slow motion. When I looked without the benefit of the sight, I saw it on the ground. Different views for the awakened versus the unawakened, different effects. That's how Blake interprets it at the time, but it seems to be, at least from my impression, that when Blake is looking through the sight, he sees time slowed down, but without the sight, he kind of sees it as it actually is, you know? In what Blake thought was, oh, with the sight, I see it as it's slowed down, which is what it actually is. The reality is it's not slowed down. Blake is just being tricked into seeing it slowed down when he's using the sight. Which means this effect is a lot less powerful than it seemed at first.
Yeah. So because one thing that always kind of stood out to me, and like as you said, I sort of came to the same conclusion that like they've the effect around the house is basically kind of fake. And they've essentially basically tricked him into thinking the house is inaccessible.
Yes.
And that's interesting, because one of the things when Blake was in the Bahame house as they were doing the ritual the first time, is somebody like compliments Laird and was like, oh, you know, this is really clever, like, you know, is this like an original idea of yours, and blah blah blah. And then that had never sat right with me, because then we sort of found out later that the effect is just slowing down time around the house, and it's sort of like, well, that's not that clever. Creative. like you know, as far as time magic goes, creating a slow zone seems like a fairly unoriginal idea. So like this makes that line retroactively make a lot more sense, where it's like, oh, he hasn't slowed down time in an area. He's managed to find a way to trick practitioners, or maybe even just specifically Blake, into thinking that that's what's happening.
I love that this reveal basically solidifies Laird really just being a con man, right? And it recontextualizes so many things that we just put down to smugness. Like that one you just mentioned, you know, the interpretation we could have at that time is, oh, it's just people complimenting Laird because he's, you know, head honcho and whatever, he's a bit up himself, right? When actually there's a real explanation for it. Another one I like is, you know, Laird sent Andy there to watch Blake as he noticed the effect, which at the time we both commented on, like, this just feels like a smug dick move. But
yeah,
Andy's not there just to watch Blake. Andy's there to tell Blake how it works, so that Blake believes what it is and kind of gives up, which works perfectly, right? Like, Laird plays into this idea of the smugness to an extent. Obviously, he's still pretty smug bastard, but he plays into this because these effects only work because you believe they work how he says they do, right? I think it's great how much recontextualization happens here.
Well, I mean, you know, from watching TV and movies, I know that the most important part of being a con man is confidence.
Exactly right.
I mean, that's where the term comes from, right? So it's essentially part of Led's whole shtick. It's great. It's one of those reveals. I think when I first did it, I was just kind of like, oh, that's a bit underwhelming. And then the more you sit on it, the more you're like, ooh, this changes a lot, actually.
Yeah, like the house maybe is accessible. I mean, maybe it's still inaccessible to a point, but it's at least a lot easier to deal with now than it was when we first found out about it, right?
Yeah. Well, if it's mostly just perception that they're altering, then that, like, to me, that means there's maybe two most likely ideas behind what would happen if Blake went in there, which is one, he basically gets a couple of free months to plan stuff when like he would be speeding up essentially,
Yeah.
not everyone else slowing down.
Yeah.
Or two, he could just like put himself to sleep and then like I don't know, like roll. I guess it's uphill, so I don't know exactly how to do it. But if he just like fell
Close
asleep
his eyes
then,
and walk through,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah, like why not? Like that's
Yeah.
essentially what he kind of does to get around some of the tricks later this chapter.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways that this becomes a lot more surmountable of a threat, right?
Yeah.
Which I love. I think it's worth us talking about the police station a bit as well, because I think that's
Yes,
quite a
please.
confusing one.
Yeah, I definitely. You've written a summary here, and this is good because I don't think I 100% understood what had gone down there with this recontextualization.
Yeah, so let's talk through the timeline here. Blake wakes up in his cell in the morning, something like 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. And it plays out as normal, with Blake eventually kind of hammering home how shady Duncan is until it cracks and Duncan has to, in air quotes, reset the timeline, right?
Yep.
What this reset actually does, though, is use perception magic to basically kind of move people back to their original positions and make everybody forget that they've already, lived the past 2 or 3 hours. So Blake wakes up in his cell again and thinks he's waking up for the first time, but in reality he's waking up later in the day, 2 or 3 hours later, and his perception and everybody else who's involved perception, they all think, hey, it's the morning and this is all playing out for the first time, while Duncan knows, actually, this has already happened before and he can kind of deal with it, right?
Yeah, and so basically, so then my understanding sort of following on from this is they would have been moving, their perception was still kind of being warped because they're having to move faster to catch up?
Possibly, yes, or Isadora kind of talks about, back when we thought time magic was real, I mean, not time magic's real, but
Those were the days.
Isadora kind of talks about how this is disruptive because reality kind of has to rubber band a bit to catch up with what's been happening, which is still the case in my kind of read of what this is. Their perceptions kind of rubber band, where bits of time are either sped up or kind of slowed down to make them kind of slide back into alignment with the outside reality.
Yeah, so for instance, because there's a bit where Blake ends up in his cell again, and so basically, so what you're sort of saying is, he thought he was in there for, say, a couple of hours, but really he was in there for maybe 20 minutes or something. And,
yes,
and that was his rubber banding point. So, maybe there was another police officer who the first time they were sort of alone to rubber band was when they went to the toilet or something. So
yeah, or they sit down to work at their desk for 20 minutes and look up and it's been 3 hours and they're like, oh shit, I've been working longer than I thought, Maybe when you accidentally stay up late playing video games, it's just your reality rubber banding to catch up.
That's what it is. Okay.
That explains so much, yes. Anyway, that's kind of how I see it working. And there's some comments later on that dive into this stuff. I think we'll get into it a bit later as well.
Yeah.
So Blake has figured out the Behaim tricks, and because of this, Laird tries to freeze him like 4 times here maybe, and Blake only loses maybe 2 or 3 seconds each time, knowing that this trick that Laird is pulling is costing him more power than it's costing Blake. And so he's kind of gaining a bit of an advantage here. And he's able to stop Laird from being able to make any real moves and kind of maintain a tentative hold over his hostage situation.
Yeah, and there are also bits where Blake is trying to lessen the amount he's perceiving in order to lessen the amount they can alter his perception. So he fights Duncan with his eyes closed for a bit. So that Duncan can't do tricks on him.
Can't do anything, yeah.
Which is, you made a comment a few chapters ago comparing something I can't even remember to that bit in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where Yugi has to play cards blindly because someone's in his head, and I think this is an even more apt time to compare to that. Blake's just intentionally doing things literally blind in order to limit what his opponents can do to him. It's great. And then, the other half of this, apart from just running around with his eyes closed, is Evan seems to be able to help him. There's this, every time he loses time, Evan sort of flutters past him. So I guess Evan's acting as some sort of clock, or I didn't fully understand what Evan was doing here.
I think what's happening here is, if you imagine Laird trying to freeze Blake in place, what that would look like from someone who isn't Blake is Blake just suddenly stands there and doesn't move for a second or two, and Evan is able to kind of use his natural escape inclinations to kind of snap Blake out of it. So he zones out for a second or two, Evan kind of flaps his wings, and Blake suddenly kind of snaps back into real perception of time.
Yeah, okay. I mean, well, that's just interesting because, like, Evan lost time in the second trip to the police station.
Yes.
With Blake and Rose. So, like, yeah. I mean, I guess, I don't know. I feel like, I guess Evan must have been staying out of Laird's sight or something, because otherwise I would assume Laird would just try to hit both of them at the same time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I suspect that now that they know how it works, they're able to kind of... I mean, Evan could literally just be flying around in circles with his eyes closed, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Anyway, so... Yeah. Basically, Blake has cracked it, and it makes it a lot more easy for them to... Basically, Laird is powerless here. Powerless in the sense of he can't do any magic. He obviously has a lot of people around to help.
Yeah. And so there's one other bit I want to call out here that we'll have to talk about for a bit, which is... So Duncan sort of attacks Maggie, and as she's sort of getting up, Blake notices her head was bowed. And I saw a glimpse of something inhuman in her expression when she changed hands, shaking the blood free of her gauntlet. Was she possessed? Was that what was going on with her? And yeah, I mean, like, obviously we've been getting a lot of hints that Maggie has seemed really unhinged for quite a while now. And I'd thought a lot of it was maybe just her or her excitement at this whole fire and blood situation. But the idea that this isn't entirely Maggie actually makes like a lot of sense. Like, my first thought here was to tie it back to this whole idea of how she left Jacob's Bell, the things that she sort of refused to talk about. I'm wondering if all of her left Jacob's Bell. Like, I don't know how splitting yourself up magic...
Like, you feel like she's left parts of herself behind?
I mean, yeah, maybe. Or... I guess, I don't know. I mean, the other thing is like, we know she's friends with Patriarch, so, like, maybe... Well, I guess that's not really how glamour works. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know enough about how splitting yourself up magic would work, but she could have sent her more reckless and bloodthirsty side to go, and I don't know. That seems like pretty powerful, so, like, I don't think it's that. Yeah. The ability to split yourself up like that would probably be a huge asset in a lot of situations, so...
It feels like to me what's happened is a bit of a controlled possession where Maggie's got some reckless thing that she's been using to, I don't know, give her an edge in combat situations or whatever. And she's just been carrying it for a bit too long.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, this whole bit actually had me like remembering Blake bled himself open, and there was a lot of talk of him maybe getting possessed at some point, and that's never really been dealt with. I suppose now he's largely made out of wax. So maybe that counts. I don't know. Yeah.
You think Blake has something that's slipped inside him too?
I mean, he could. Like, it's hard because we're in his perspective, but that would be a very nice explanation for why he's been a bit less human. That'd be very convenient, because then I wouldn't have to blame him as much. So I like
very
that.
Morally convenient. Yeah. So Blake is kind of talking about the hostages they have, and at some point it becomes clear that Laird knows exactly who Corvidae is, and this causes him to be like, oh shit, you have Corvidae? Man, like, Corvidae is scary enough that Laird knows who he is and realizes that he should play it safe. I mean, like, Blake puts this down to, we have access to the same books, it's fine. But, Laird's from Jacob's Bell. I don't know. This feels like Corvidae is famous enough to be pulling some real wild shit.
Well, actually, Blake said that line about having the same access to the books, but I don't really understand that, because I don't think Blake knows that Laird got taught by Rose, so I don't know what books he's really referring to.
Maybe he thinks that Corvidae is just in the public tomes.
But yeah, no, like, Corvidae is just so fucking scary though. Like, Laird's right. The bit where Blake sort of goes to Rose and he's like, "We should wrap this up. Where's Corvidae?" And Rose is like, "Oh, I told him to stop Duncan." And Blake's like, "Did you tell him how?" And she says no. And then Blake just pauses for a second. He's like, "Go upstairs," which is where Joanna, Duncan's fiancée, is. It's like, "And stop him now." And it's just this moment of like, oh, fucking hell, Corvidae. Like, so it's so creepy.
He's really the kind of other that you have to micromanage.
Well, it's just like the way he disrupts things, like, changes ownership on a universal level. Like, we've already talked about this. It's so emotionally, like, it's an emotional attack, really.
Oh yeah.
Like, it attacks your connections to the world, literally, and in the world of Pact, and that's so, like, it's so existentially terrifying. I think that's why he creeps you out so much more than, like, Hexus or Mary. Like, he's just terrifying on a fundamental level.
All of these summons were mistaken for demons, right? Tallow Man, the Oil Slick, Bloody Mary. But JP is the one that I kind of get why he's confused for a demon, because he does have that vibe of, like, he's just upsetting the order of the world. Like, that's just what he does.
No, you're right. I would still be happy to classify him as such based on what I know so far in the story. Like, the idea of him being a member of, like, the Seventh Choir or whatever, like, the fact that he's undoing connections, or I guess he rearranges them, but like, he's messing with the fundamental fabric, whereas, Mary just runs around stabbing things like a maniac. Like, sure, she's violent, but she doesn't unmake universal
exactly constants. She doesn't violate, she just attacks. Anyway, so Laird and Blake are talking, and Laird is still trying to freeze time, and he's failing until he reveals that, even with these time tricks that Blake knows about, Laird has been doing the oldest time trick in the book, buying time. Time for Conquest to arrive and to defeat Rose's summons, and we really get the sense that this contest is about to be over.
Yeah, like, I don't really understand what Blake's plan is. I mean, I touched on that I was going to touch on this later. Like, he figured out the trick, and so I guess his plan was to just have Laird charge him and hope it would still, like, just being able to dampen Laird's effects would mean he could win, which seems short-sighted, as we see here. So I don't quite understand what Blake's plan is here, because this seems like just about the only way this could have gone.
Yeah, I think he wanted to use this reveal to kind of have Laird in a position where he thought he'd be able to use his magic to get out, but he couldn't. But what ended up happening was Blake just kind of had to reveal that he knew about it right off the bat, because Laird tried to trick immediately, which I think you could have predicted was going to happen. I don't know. You're right that I think Blake had a pretty good start of a plan, but didn't really know how to bring it home. Unless this was all part of Blake's plan, in which case the next chapter's going to get crazy.
Yeah, I did not get that impression from Blake's.
We're inside his head. we're inside his head, and he's like, "Oh shit, things have gotten really bad." Which, I mean, unless he thinks that the Behaims can actually read his mind, is a pretty high level play to make.
But that's it.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna find out how strong Conquest has become, right? He actually seems to have been able to easily take out the Tallow Man, what you're referring to as Hexus, and Bloody Mary, who all seem quite powerful, which means there's trouble gonna happen.
Yeah.
But that's not for this chapter, that's for next chapter. Before we get to there, I wanted to pull out some comments. Usually we just pull out one comment each that we really like, but for this one I want to pull out some comments that talked about Behaim time magic and kind of pointed out some cool little things that were hidden in the story about it, because I love this stuff.
Yes, it also saves us from actually having to go and reread it all, because I feel like I don't want to do that right now, because I feel like in another month I'll want to do it for another reason.
Yeah, I think that's going to keep happening, which is why it's great that there are people who are doing it for us in the comments.
Yes.
I want to pull out what I think is my favourite one of these, which is one by Matthew K, who points out that Laird's implement is a pocket watch, right? And obviously when you find this out, it's like, oh yeah, of course it is, because it's a watch, like, duh. But the other thing about this that I really like is a pocket watch obviously has such strong connotations with hypnosis, which is essentially what Behaim time magic is. It's like such a cool second level to be added onto his implement that just makes it all kind of fit into place so nicely.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic observation, and I love that so much. That's just I love everything about this comment. It's so good.
It's such a great one, definitely. What's another good one? Oh, so Mayhem, a user called Mayhem, pointed out that after Blake defeats Duncan at the police station, he goes back to his cell and falls asleep. And he sleeps for what seems like to him to be something like 6 or 7 hours, which obviously he had just kind of drained himself of blood, so it doesn't seem too weird, but it is a bit like, oh, Blake, you slept for a long time there. But of course, now we know that wasn't that long. It was actually something like 2 or 3 hours, and he just kind of was catching up with his missed perceptions of time.
Yeah, and I think Blake even theorizes that it's like if Duncan had gotten to do a round 3, then it's like, from Blake's perspective, he would have woken up in his cell like, another 3 or 4 hours later. Like he would have felt like he slept for 10 hours or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think the police station is one of the is full of these moments. Another one that is pointed out by a user called Dread Pirate points out that when Blake wakes up for the second time, in air quotes, he notices that he woke up later because the sun is much higher in the sky, and this is just kind of like, oh yeah, of course, because obviously you woke up later because you were already awake. You just kind of have experienced 3 hours later than you thought you would.
Do you think, because it's just their perception that's being messed with, like Blake wasn't in his cell when Duncan does the spell to send them back.
Yeah.
So do you think like they all get sort of teleported by the spirits back to their original location, or was there just this like scene change moment where everyone was like walking back to their original positions? Like somebody had called cut and they all kind of zone out and walk back to where they were.
Duncan puts them to sleep first and then spends about an hour meticulously dragging people around before he kind of calls action again. I don't know. I suspect they are kind of teleported back, or they kind of have about a minute of kind of zombie-ish like rewinding maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it matters at all, so I'm going to go with the more hilarious answer, which is that they all zombie back.
Oh, no, I think the best answer is Duncan has to manually put them back into place. Anyway, so those were 3 of the comments that I really liked that just called out these little hints that were dropped throughout the story. I love this kind of stuff.
And so another comment we should quickly mention is the first comment in the thread is from Walbo himself. And he comments that this chapter came out on the 3-year anniversary of him uploading and scheduling the first chapter of Worm.
Yeah.
And so that means, using mathematics, that today is the 8-year anniversary. So it's essentially the 8-year anniversary of Walbo's starting web serialized stories. Which is, like that's he's written so much.
Yeah, it's a big occasion. What can we do to commemorate it, Elliot?
Well, I just want to say 8 years is like such a long time to be doing this, but also for what he's written, 8 years is like also like, he's written so much more than 8 years worth of content at the same time.
How long has the latest Game of Thrones book been taking?
Yeah, exactly. So, with all that in mind, the fact that he's done so much and he's done it over, a significant amount of time, we just wanted to give an extra special shout out to patreon.com/Walbo, which is obviously how Walbo gets rewarded for these fantastic stories. He relies on this for his income. So if you can spare some dollars, please do.
Yeah, he's been doing it for 8 years, and I think it's easy for people to, at this point, think something along the lines of like, oh, well, if he's already able to make an income off it, it doesn't matter too much if I donate or not. But that's a naive level of thinking, I think, because patrons do drop off and people forget to update their credit card or whatever it is. And so we do need more patrons to come in to make sure that Walbo is able to do this sustainably, So
yeah, absolutely.
Definitely check it out, and you don't have to donate. You don't if you aren't able to, of course, but any donation that you can give would be helpful to Walbo. I know he also has, I think, a PayPal. If you want to do a one-time donation, you don't want to have a whole Patreon account set up, that's fine too.
Yes.
So patreon.com/Wildbow. Now, our next episode, 7.6, will be coming out on Friday the 14th. But until then, if you want to talk about this big reveal and leave us your favourite moments of time fuckery that were kind of hinted at from earlier in the story, the best place to do that is in our discussion thread, which will be linked in the show notes of this episode down below.
Yeah, and if you've already forgotten that date, like I have, you could just head to doofmedia.com, and one of the cool perks, one of the cool features on that website.
Why not?
Yeah, okay. One of the cool perks of that website is the calendar page, which shows you when all the episodes are coming out. Not just of our show, but of all the other great shows on the Doof Media Network.
Yes, and there are a number of great shows on there. Check out the calendar, and why not just pick a day at random? Because I'm pretty sure that Scott and Matt record a podcast every single day. So pick a random day and check out a new random show. There's great stuff in there for everybody to enjoy.
Yeah, and of course, some of the things on there, you may be like, what's that? I don't know that. And that's because they're patron exclusives. So things like being able to actually watch Matt and Scott record We've Got Ward Live.
Yep. There's monthly Q&As.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of cool stuff that are sort of patron-only sessions. So if you head to patreon.com/doofmedia, you can find out more about those and come and start getting involved in them.
Yes, something that we don't usually plug every episode, but I think is worth a shout out is our Twitter at MediaMD Podcast. You can go there and you can chat to us, tweet at us, and we'll probably respond. I've got it set up to send me notifications, so if you tweet at me or follow us on there, I'll get it and I'll give you a digital shout out or a digital high five or whatever the kids do on Twitter these days.
Yes, I'm actually in the process of learning how to use Twitter.
Oh my god, Elliot, did you get a Twitter set up? Finally.
Yes, so I'll be learning how to use that Twitter account as well.
Yes, that's what it's called, Twitter. Yes.
and so I too will be able to respond to the tweets we get on Twitter.
There you go. If that isn't an extra special reason to follow us on Twitter, I don't know what is. Apart from that, we will see you all for the next episode of 7.6 on Friday the 14th.
See ya.
Bye.